Press the bell icon on the YouTube app to never miss a video from News Laundry.
Hello and welcome to News Laundry Interviews. Today we have, not in our studio because we live in a corona world, we have joining us remotely Congress leader Digvijay Singh. Welcome, sir.
Good evening.
So, Mr. Singh, you have held various very important positions with the Congress. You have been a two-term chief minister in Madhya Pradesh. You have been in charge of UP during an election. But most recently, I guess, much of your experience of politics would be used in keeping your flock in Madhya Pradesh together. And you have made a few statements saying that, no one from the Madhya Pradesh group of MLAs will defect. And for our audience who have not been up to date, in Congress, there were a couple of defections, resignations of Congress MLAs. This is in the context of the Rajya Sabha election. What gives you this confidence after the 22 who flipped with Mr. Scindia a few months ago?
Well, most of these MLAs who are with us today, they had an offer of 35 to 50 crores to defect. So when they had the opportunity to take 35 to 50 crores and still remain with the Congress party. So therefore, I think they have seen the game through that, and they have resisted that offer and are still with the Congress party. And you'll be surprised, except for one, all the tribal MLAs have stood by the Congress party. And we are confident that 92 of the Congress MLAs in the House today would stay on with the Congress party.
Okay, so now you said that 30 to 50 crores. That is a huge sum. At least when I joined reporting, I would never have imagined that these sums. But you have in the past also made some rather startling claims which you could not back up.
Right.
Well, I have a few here. I'll go earlier order where you said Amit Shah promised a grand temple at Ayodhya. Next day, bomb blasts at Mahabodhi temple at Bodh Gaya. Is there a connect? You kind of suggested that there was a connect to that bomb blast and the BJP. You had.
Let's not go into that.
No, but I'm just saying, when you make a claim like that, is there any way you can, like 30 to 50 crores? I'm just saying that you have said many things in the past. It would make what you say a lot more solid if you could actually give some substance.
Every statement that I had made and I make is based on facts. On 3rd of March, I had said that they are being offered huge sums of money and the MLAs are being offered. And this came true. In fact, but I never expected Mr. Jyotiraj Scindia to move out.
What was his incentive? He has enough money.
No, he was one of the senior most general secretaries, one of the senior most Congress political leader in Madhya Pradesh. And he was the general secretary of the All India Congress Committee and an excellent relationship with the Nehru Gandhi family. His father was in the Congress party and everyone had a great regard for him. And I agree, he has a lot of money. There's no need for him to be. But at the same time, the MLAs had that incentive, which they unfortunately couldn't refuse.
What was Mr. Scindia's incentive? Why did he go?
You see, people say that he wanted Rajya Sabha, so no one was denying him Rajya Sabha, because with that majority, the Congress party in Madhya Pradesh could have returned 2 members of parliament in Rajya Sabha. So there was no problem on that. But at the same time, as the grapevine says that he had been offered a cabinet rank in the government of India once this goes through. Otherwise, there is no obvious gain for him after defection.
So that didn't work out. Will you be welcoming him back to the party soon? That clearly didn't work out. It hasn't worked out yet. So will you be welcoming him back to the Congress soon?
He never asked me to go out, so I don't think he'll tell me whether he's coming back.
No, okay. So, I'll come back to this defection, and you have asked for a tighter anti-defection law. I mean, there are certain problems with that to begin with, having a defection law. So let's deal with that first. Recently I have this article open in front of me where you have, said that there should be a stronger anti-defection law. What exactly do you have in mind first, before we come to dissecting how the law is and why it's problematic? What would you do if you were asked to amend the law?
First of all, there has to be an anti-defection law. We have that anti-defection law. But then any person who wants to switch over to a different political party, in spite of being the fact that he has been elected from a different political party, he has to resign the seat. That's good enough. But then he should not be allowed to contest for next 6 years.
I see.
His qualification should include that. Otherwise, what has happened is people who defected are not MLAs but yet become a minister.
Right.
So that kind of a thing is not good for any parliamentary democracy.
So for those of us watching in the audience who aren't clear about the anti-defection law, I mean, even now, if you defect, you have to resign your seat. But if a minimum number of MLAs defect and they break the party, then they can get to retain their seats.
Two-thirds of the MLAs,
yeah,
if they defect, then they retain their seats.
So the only amendment you would add is that if you defect, you should have to resign from your seat and not contest for the next 6 years. Okay.
Yes.
Now, let's
also at the same time, should be banned for holding any position in the government also post defection for next 6 years.
Now, for a defection law, like for example, we see many bills or motions that are put in the US. You can vote against your party because the primary purpose of an elected representative is to serve the constituents, those who have elected him or her to the assembly or to the parliament. So therefore, depending on what their interests are, is how any elected representative should vote. With this whip system, and you having to vote along the party lines, doesn't the anti-defection law, in a sense, make an elected representative answerable to the high command or to the whip rather than to the people who have elected him or her?
See, differing with the political party on issues of substance, then you must have the, I would say, guts to say so and then walk out of the party on issues which you don't agree with the party. What is the point in staying on in a party where there's a basic difference of opinion on issues?
No, but it could also be on a particular bill that is introduced which someone doesn't agree with.
But in this case, what you have seen just now.
Yeah, absolutely. This case I agree. But I'm saying if you make a law, it won't make exceptions ki is case mein law apply hoga, usme nahi hoga. For example, I think any elected representative with a conscience should say that all political parties should come under RTI. But on this, you, BJP, all seem to be against it. I would say someone who represents me should say, no, I will vote for this bill.
That's fine. If there is no 3-line whip issued, you can vote against it.
Yes, but how often is a bill introduced without a whip being issued?
No, generally, 3-line whip is not issued every time. Okay. Only in very specific cases it is issued.
Okay, so now, so let's come back to these defections. You're confident that since they passed the Agni Pariksha, bhai itna paisa offer hua tha, they didn't defect, ab aap nahi tod sakte unhe. But
looks like it.
But when did politics get to this, where so openly people are saying, and I guess no news professional can put it because it's hard to prove, and then you can be harassed and cases can be put. But whether it is in hushed tones or whether it is on social media, whether it's people like you who don't have to worry about the legal pushback that will come from the BJP, like journalists have to fear that. When did it come to that politicians are being bought and sold like this?
Well, I've been making these allegations against them from day one. No one has contradicted it. Not even the MLAs who have defected. Not even the political party. If they had moral courage, they would have contradicted my statement, or they would have hauled me to the court. I'm making a statement in front of you just now that they've been bought over. It's a public statement, and I stand by it.
Okay, but what is it about our politics that it has got to a stage where it is so brazen, but there are no repercussions? There is no pushback from the people. I mean, you would assume that those people will not be re-elected, but time and again, such people are re-elected. I mean, your own party has people who have defected from, I mean, I remember when I used to, write this political satire show in the 2000s, back when you and Uma Bharti had that election, when you were contesting the third term as chief minister. People like Sanjay Nirupam, the kind of vitriol they used to spew against Sonia Gandhi, now they are in the Congress. I mean, what is the incentive for people to come and go? If it's not monetary, what is the other incentive?
Unfortunately, political ideology has taken a back seat in Indian politics. And what I will get, what I can get, has become more important than what I should get. So therefore, I think the whole political scenario in India today is what you can give me. But it's not based on political ideology. That political ideology is missing. The deficit is there, which I think is a sad day for any parliamentary democracy. Your commitment to the political ideology you stand for. I think, why should there be a compromise on that? If Sanjay Nirupam strongly felt with against the political ideology or against Mrs. Sonia Gandhi, then there was no point of his joining the Congress party.
So why did he?
Ask him.
Okay, but since you're talking about defection, I thought I'd bring up one case. There are many others. Okay, let's stick to Madhya Pradesh. What led to the falling out? I mean, you have been, an integral part of Madhya Pradesh. Like I said, a two-term chief minister. You were considered the biggest name in Madhya Pradesh. And Jyotiraditya Scindia, the next generation coming up. What was the equation before he quit between you, Mr. Nath, and Jyotiraditya Scindia? Clearly, there was some problem when Rahul Gandhi tweeted that picture with patience and hope, or I forget exactly what it was. But what was the problem? I mean, it clearly was not an easy ride, even before the election.
In fact, it was I and Mr. Arjun Singh Ji who had brought his father into the Congress party, his late father, Mr. Madhavrao Scindia. And he did exceedingly well as a central minister, as a general secretary of the party. And he had a great sort of opportunity, and he delivered to the people and to the party and before a very unfortunate plane accident. And even Jyotiraditya Ji, he came into politics, joined the Congress party, became member of parliament, and returned to parliament 4 times, became a minister in the central cabinet. He was the general secretary of the All India Congress Committee. As far as Madhya Pradesh is concerned, in our relationship between me and Jyotiraditya Scindia, or with me, Kamalnath Ji and Jyotiraditya Scindia, we are extremely cordial relationship. There was no acrimony as such. And even as a chief minister, or as during his father's time also, we were both the same age, contemporary also. We came from the same area. But whenever there was an issue, we sat across the table and sorted it out. And mostly it was give and take, so there was no problem within the party. Even with Jyotiraditya Scindia also, we used to have discussions. We used to discuss issues, and we used to sort out issues. And I'm really telling you, I'm seriously telling you that I never expected Jyotiraditya Scindia Ji to defect. And in fact, till I think 4th or 5th of March, I was in touch with him. But after that, he suddenly sort of switched off his phone. We couldn't contact him.
So, and I mean, clearly, I mean, I have good reason to believe this because I have been told by someone close to the people involved that Mr. Nath and Mr. Scindia were clearly not getting on even in the run-up to the election. Is it a generational thing? Because it is clear that Mr. Pilot and Mr. Gehlot do not seem to be best buddies. At one level, maybe justifiably so, Mr. Pilot feels that he should be the prime in Rajasthan and not Mr. Gehlot. Is that a problem? Is it a problem of the old guard not being able to step aside for the youngsters? Or is it a problem that the young generation of Congress doesn't seem to grow up?
The generational change is obvious. There has to be a generational change. And it is the Congress party which has always encouraged younger people to be in the forefront. Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru became All India Congress Committee president at the age of 38, Maulana Azad at 37.
But life expectancy in India was a lot less than it is now. I think it must have been in the 40s.
It's not connected to that. It's not connected to that. The point I'm trying to make is that there has to be a smooth transition from generation to generation. So therefore, there is an ample opportunity. And if you see the present formation of the working committee of Sonia Gandhi, there's a mix of senior and junior both. So there has to be a mix rather than one or the other.
Sure, but I'm talking about the primary, like the chief minister's position. Should it go to the younger person? Are the young people in Congress not adult enough? They remain children for too long? I mean, what's the problem?
It's not that. It's not that. I strongly feel that the election of the leader of the legislature party has to be from the MLAs. The MLAs have to show their sort of liking or their preference for a particular leader. Even when I was elected as a chief minister in 1993, I was 46 and I was contesting against Shama Charanjit Shukla, who was about 65, 66 that time. And there was a proper election, and although I got more votes, but at the same time, we had the greatest relationship. Mr. Shamaji Shukla and I were excellent relationship we had him. And even I can tell you that he was also, when I joined Congress party in 1971, he was the chief minister of Madhya Pradesh. So it's a question of having a personal rapport among the leaders. And I can tell you there was no trust deficit, or there was no kind of a lack of rapport between Kamal Nathji and Mr. Jyotiraj Scindia also at the same time.
Okay, I'll take your word for it. But now, with the kind of buying and selling happening, the Congress has remained in power in a number of states and also nationally for a very long time. I mean, I want to come to a very fundamental question. And this will tie in with what I said about parties not coming under RTI. Where do parties get the money to run? I mean, the kind of melas that happen, the kind of, even just to feed chai and samosa to all the people who are in, big leaders like yours homes. Each time I have gone, even back when I used to be a ground reporter, per day expenses must be running into like tens of thousands. Is there any transparency of where, and on election, it like goes into overdrive? Where does this money come from for parties?
Let me tell you just now that there was a virtual rally in Bihar of Mr. Amit Shah.
Right.
He himself said more than 72,000 LEDs were put all over Bihar. And roughly the hiring charges would be of 15,000 to 20,000 rupees per LED. So that adds up to about more than 140 crores for one virtual rally, which was hardly attended by a few thousand people. So this kind of money is only BJP which has the money to spend this kind of this nature.
Now,
yes,
Congress also had that kind of money to spend at one time.
It never did. We the political parties have to submit our annual returns to the Central Election Commission, audited accounts, and we have donors. Then there are election bonds now, which the corporates can
Which
sort
are
of.
hugely problematic.
Yes, it has its own problems. It is heavily loaded in favor of the ruling party. Anyway, I will not go into that. But then we have donors, small donors also helping us out. We collect money through our treasurer, through our coupons. So we collect money on that.
Okay, I'm not convinced of that answer, but why do parties, including the Congress, refuse to want to come under the RTI? I mean, if you are representing people, the purpose of political party is political governance for the people, then what is the problem in letting them, just like any public institution, comes under RTI? Why don't you do that? On this, we see BJP and Congress coming together, just like often you used to come together in amendments to the RTI.
Let me tell you one thing. I was one of the first political leaders to support the RTI movement.
I recall that. I've been to your house, you won't remember, at South Block.
Okay, you didn't have this kind of
No, I didn't have this kind of mustache. You were helping us to the RTI awards. I had come with Manish Sisodia and Arvind Kejriwal. We used to be RTI activists back then.
Okay,
I am aware of that, but the party has not been as...
Let me finish. So as far as I'm concerned, I'm all for transparency. And in fact, I was one of the first chief ministers to enact a law on right to information in the Madhya Pradesh Assembly. But unfortunately, we had a BJP government which we never got presidential assent from there. But at the same time, personally, I have no problem if the political parties are brought under the RTI.
Why can't you convince the other leaders of your party? Do they have too much to hide?
I have my limitations.
Do you then? Okay. Fine. Now, coming back to Madhya Pradesh, how are you planning to make sure that there are no more defections? I mean, this entire, resort politics, will you have to shuffle them away? I mean, are you planning to go to the police?
Personally, I don't believe in this kind of resort politics on a personal basis. But at the same time, in Madhya Pradesh, the minimum vote to be elected, first preference vote, is 52. And we are 92. So we have about, 40 votes additional. But we need 12 more to get a second person elected.
Okay.
So there's a problem until there's a major defection in the BJP of about 10, 15 people. We can't get a second one elected. And also at the same time, the BJP doesn't have the numbers to get a third of their, and there's only the 2 Congress and 2 BJP. There is no third BJP or third Congress. So as it stands today, there is a chance of 2 BJP members being elected and 1 Congress. But it all sort of I can't sort of predict at the moment. But there should not be any problem.
Okay. Now, just correct me if I'm wrong. Do you have another 5-10 minutes? I mean,
Yeah.
You have time, right? So, I recall you had said this when you were contesting election for the 3rd term as Chief Minister of Madhya Pradesh, when Uma Bharti won and became Chief Minister. You had said something along the lines that if you lose this, you will not contest another election. Did you not say that?
Yes, I said I will not contest for next 10 years. I didn't.
Okay, you didn't. Now, why is that? Like, what purpose does that really serve? I mean, why would you make a statement like that?
Well, there should be accountability in politics.
Okay.
So I owned up I owned it up, and I said, okay, fine, I will not contest for the next 10 years and work for the party, and I did work for the party.
Okay. You also, when you contested this time, the BJP candidate who won, a deeply problematic one, won by I think over 3 lakh votes.
Yeah, 360,000 votes. I never expected.
Pragya Thakur.
Yeah.
What does that tell you about the politics? Because I do recall you were accused not once but several times of towing the soft Hindutva line during your chief ministerial run in Madhya Pradesh. I mean, maybe you're very religious and you had all this, the क्या कहते हैं, जो रस्मो रिवाज होते हैं कि ये हवन करेंगे वो करेंगे. Was that something that you were going, and now the BJP has taken that and taken it to a level which is just beyond anyone's control?
See, I belong to a family which was highly religious and which is still very highly religious. My mother was a very religious person, although my father was not very religious so much. So I've inherited that. In my old family, the house also, we've got 7 temples with all that is there. And I'm I'm a good Hindu. I'm a practicing Hindu. And I have no sort of hesitation to own this up. But at the same time, my religion, my Hindu is or Sanatan Dharma is equal respect to all religions. Sampradaya Sadbhav. This is what I believe in. That is equal respect to all religions. And I was the first chief minister to sort of take action against Bajrang Dal, the Student Islamic Movement of India, both. Because I have always seen that there is some kind of understanding between communal Hindu and a communal Muslim, because they feed on each other. Until you have a communal Muslim in the community, there wouldn't be a backlash among the Hindus also. So we need a person who is abusive or who's a rabid religious fundamentalist in a political party to sort of help the other rabid religious fundamentalists in the other religious group. As far as soft Hindutva is concerned, I don't believe Hindutva has anything to do with religion. It's a political connotation of Mr. E. Savarkar, who brought the word Hindutva. It had nothing to do with religion. It has nothing to do with religion.
Although, I mean, that is contested, the etymology of the word.
There is no soft or hard Hindutva.
Okay.
It has no religion as such with religion.
And although that, I mean, the etymology of Hindutva is still contested, but I mean, that's not relevant to this conversation. But when you said that, there has to be a ideological extreme from that side to be a response from this side, I mean, it sounds suspiciously like the action-reaction kind of quote made famous. I'm just saying that, is it too much to ask to keep religion out of politics? Is that too much of an ask?
Yes, I agree with you. In fact, that historical J.S. Vermaji's Supreme Court decision, where he sort of exonerated Mr. Manohar Joshi in an election petition.
It is also it is often misrepresented by people about what it actually meant.
Exactly, and even I was Mr. Justice Verma was from Madhya Pradesh. He was very fond of me, and I had the greatest regard for him. And I used to have discussion after he retired. I used to have heated sort of I would say exchange and discussion about that
Judgment.
That judgment which he gave. And to a certain extent, he had agreed, but it has been misrepresented, although he didn't mean that.
Okay. Now, what is your future politically? Where I mean, do we look at you contesting another Lok Sabha election next time? Are you going to be another chief minister of Madhya Pradesh? But, I mean, what is your next generation? Because now with Mr. Scindia gone, what are your second line of leaders in the Congress?
Well, in politics, there is never a vacuum. Some vacuum will be filled up. By whom it doesn't, I can't sort of predict just now. But at the same time, I feel that I've had a very fruitful innings in politics in Madhya Pradesh, and at the national level also. I was the General Secretary in the AICC for 13 long years, where I've handled states like UP, Bihar, United Andhra, Odisha, Assam, then handled elections in Rajasthan, Maharashtra, then I was in charge of Karnataka, Goa. So I've had a very fruitful innings at the state and the national level. And now if I get re-elected in the Rajya Sabha, it depends on my leader, Mrs. Sonia Gandhi, to decide where I should work.
So why Mrs. Sonia Gandhi? Is Rahul still not old enough to take over the Congress?
Well, I would not like to get into that.
You have got into that in the past.
Yes, I really wanted him. Then he became the Congress president. and I've never agreed on his idea of resigning. He had a great opportunity because in 2019 he had virtually been accepted as a national alternative to Mr. Narendra Modi. His rating has also gone up in the national elections also, although we didn't fare too well in the Lok Sabha polls. But there was a great opportunity for him to sort of get into the mold of a national alternative if he had continued as a AICC president, or if he had been a leader of opposition in the Lok Sabha.
But why didn't he? You said he had an opportunity. He wasted an opportunity. I mean,
You better ask him. I can't speak out for him.
There was a time they said anything that Digvijay Singh says is what Rahul Gandhi is thinking. I mean, you were considered, before Mr. Scindia became number 2, there was a time when Digvijay Singh was number 2. He was considered the insider of the Gandhis. I mean, I personally believe the Gandhis, there are just Sonia, Rahul and Priyanka, but you were considered the voice of Rahul Gandhi. What, you're not in favor anymore? You're not?
I totally reject this claim of yours. I was never sort of a mentor or some kind of an advisor in some advisor form to anyone. He is I've worked very closely with Mr. Rahul Gandhi. He has a mind of his own, and he's the way the opposition party has been sort of underplaying his talent or whatever they have been speaking about him. Let us face facts that he was the first one to sort of warn Mr. Prime Minister about what COVID can do to the health of this country and to the health of the economy of this country. So therefore, I think he's been most underrated. He's not only well informed, and he has a mind of his own, and he has a future.
But what's the problem if we live in a time where people with very few accomplishments and even fewer achievements can make such a big deal about their perceived accomplishments? A man, if you're saying with such a mind of his own and brilliant ideas, what stops him from being able to communicate that to the people of this country when he has one of the oldest and the largest political parties in the country backing him? I mean, he's pretty much the prime. I mean, nobody can, I mean, I believe it's the Gandhis that keep the Congress together. If it isn't for the Gandhis, there is no Congress. I mean, isn't that a failure? How can you put that on the opposition that they can't, they keep cutting him out and they keep, running propaganda against him? I mean, you have a propaganda machine of your own for the longest time.
I agree with you to a certain extent. The point I'm trying to make is that I can't speak up for Mr. Rahul Gandhi.
But as a congressman.
But I would be very happy if he leads. This is what I've been saying for a long time.
But you're saying there are enough people in there who would not be as happy as you. So which is why he's not leading.
I'm not saying that.
So what keeps him from, I haven't understood that if there are enough people who want the new generation, the younger, gen to take over, why doesn't it happen? I mean, why is it such a non-starter each time?
Ask him.
Sorry?
Let News Laundry ask him.
Well, if you can hook up an interview, I would love to. We've been trying for one for the longest time. No one gives us interviews except wonderful people like you see.
You contact his office.
Okay.
But you have not discussed fake news. I think
yes. I didn't know how much time you have. I would like to go on another 15-20 minutes. I want to discuss news also.
This one subject has been very close to my heart. Okay. And I've been watching News Laundry also and alternate news by Pratik Sinha. The kind of fake news which is sort of destroying not only the social fabric, but the very, I would say, the existence of media and the social media and politics and otherwise. It is dangerous. It is really dangerous.
But not just social media, even broadcast. I mean, I'd say they are even more dangerous.
Yes, there you are. I would reserve my comments on the kind of channels which we see these days and the kind of stories they are planting or being planted, whatever. It is sad. Now, for example, the horrible murder of Ajay Pandita in Kashmir. Why the media has blacked it out totally. And he is the one who had the courage to go back to Kashmir, to his roots, get elected as a Sarpanch, and yet he was denied security by the government. Why?
So just for our viewers who may not know what we're talking about, since this wasn't played up, he was an Indian National Congress Sarpanch who was killed just a few days ago. You may have read it in maybe the inside pages of the paper. That's who Mr. Singh is talking about.
Yeah. This is what I'm saying, that the kind of, why was this news blacked out from the media at all?
Okay, I completely agree with you. I think the media, I mean, you don't have to tell us. I mean, when we started, the purpose was that the media was just going to the dogs. But, and I'm not, going to be one of those anchors who say Rahul Gandhi jawab de ki Nepal pe kyun firing hui. I mean, I don't do that. But because right now I'm interviewing a Congress leader, and if there was Mr. Shah, Mr. Modi sitting in front of me, I would love to ask them this question. But because I can ask you about what you should be accountable for, Section 66A was one of the most foolish legislations that was introduced by Mr. Sibbal, your party. Before Mr. Kejriwal waved the Vadra papers in front of everyone, no channel had the guts to carry them. So I've also been a part of the news ecosystem since 1995. And during the Congress time, of course, we didn't live in the digital age, so it wasn't as ugly and horrible as it is now. But every channel knew the Lakshman Rekha. And that Lakshman Rekha was the Gandhis and Vadras. It was not a coincidence that that case that everybody had papers to was not covered until it was fired off Kejriwal's shoulders. देखो उसने press conference की वाड्रा पर ये allegation लगाए. सबके पास वो file थी. All I'm saying is that Mr. Chidambaram was feared. Mr. Chidambaram was feared. Mr. Sibbal's laws. Sorry?
You should be answering that question.
I should be answering which question?
That why the channels don't show that?
Because they were petrified. What I'm saying is they were as petrified of Mr. Chidambaram as who was not one of the most wonderful, angelic, soft-spoken people either. When he was talking to reporters.
I don't agree with you there.
Oh, that's because you are dealing with them as a congressman. Ask any news professional. They will tell you otherwise.
Okay.
What I'm saying is this intimidation suddenly becomes an issue for people when they're in opposition. When they're in power, and BJP is no difference. I mean, for all the party with a difference, they don't have a problem with the club. When they become the club, then they're happy with the club. So all I'm saying is that when you guys had the chance, did you relax the rules? Did you make it easier for news to operate without fear or favor? Do you think you did any concrete steps to that effect? And I agree it's broken now, and the BJP, what they're doing is horrible. But where would you say your responsibility is as a party, not you personally?
Abhinandan, let me tell you one thing. I've been in politics for the last 50 years. I have never sort of questioned media, whether the print or the electronic media, if they have put any story against me, whether it was with substance or without substance. Now, even on social media, I'm one of the few politicians who is trolled, I would say, to the greatest extent. But yet I don't mind. That's that view. And I would say that why should there be an intimidation to any kind of to media or to the journalist or whatever? As a chief minister also, you can check with your own sources in media in Madhya Pradesh. Have I ever questioned anyone who has planted a story? I will tell you an incident if you have time.
Sure.
Okay. There was this young reporter from Indian Express who is now the managing editor of Caravan.
Of Caravan, okay.
Caravan. So his father was in the state IPS career, and I knew the family very well. So he did an excellent story, very damaging to my government, of malnutrition among the primitive tribe in areas in Shivpuri. So when I read the story, I called the young man. You can check with him. And I congratulated him. I said, excellent story you've done. And I took, as a chief minister, I took corrective steps to see that the malnutrition which has been noticed was taken care of, whatever had to be done. So that the courage has to be with the politicians to accept wherever things have gone wrong and try to amend it. After all, media and in public life, you have to work together to sort of achieve the best that you can. This kind of intimidation that we'll see you, we'll stop your ads and things like that, I don't subscribe to that.
No, fine. You may personally have done that. I'm guessing you're talking about Hartosh. I will ask him. But
Of course, Hartosh is, yeah, I didn't want to mention his name, so but
I happily mention every name, but I'll check with Hartosh. But who I highly respect as a journalist, because he pulls no punches. Even when he's talking to me, he keeps accusing me of being soft on AAP and all that. So I really like him. He doesn't pull his punches.
His father was the superintendent of police of my district.
Right.
I've seen Hartosh as a young boy, about 5-6-year-old. Since then, I've known him.
Yeah,
but
so
he's an outstanding journalist.
Highly combative and without fear of favor. I agree. Now you have cleared yourself. Fine. It's up to the viewers to judge. But I'm talking to you as a congressman. While Digvijay Singh as an individual, one may have views on. You also have to be answerable for your party, right? What was your view? I don't know whether Mr. Sibal took your views, because he does give me the impression of a man who knows better than God. So I doubt he would have asked your views. But on 66A, what was your party's view that this Section 66 of the IT Act that he legislated, then it was pulled back? Did anyone say this is ridiculous?
So the point I'm trying to make is, having a provision in the Act is one thing, and using it indiscriminately is another thing.
No, it's not.
The interpretation, it's a question of interpretation of the as interpreted by the law or by the judiciary. Interpretations may differ. But yes, I believe, I'm not a lawyer, so I don't want to get into a debate on that. But I strongly feel that any healthy democracy, you must have the guts or the courage to face criticism.
Sure.
And then he's doing his job, you do your own job.
It becomes a little hard if there is the danger of being hauled up to police stations for questioning.
No, that is not that's not acceptable at all. As far, even if there was a case in the Congress party, I will certainly sort of speak up on that. There's no problem on that.
Okay, so let's just a couple on fake news. Like right now, you're right, fake news is a scourge. But now this is something even I grapple with as a news professional. While I think my profession is being discredited because of some people who act in bad faith and bad players. At the same time, I wonder, is it a good idea to put a law? Because there is no guarantee that the person or the government using a law will do it in a sensible way. They could misuse it. Like, many laws that you guys have passed, this government is going to misuse. So when you say it's open to interpretation, what is the way out? Do you think there should be some ankush or seema ki bhai news ka cancel ho jayega, license ki we will, because as it is, getting licenses of broadcast is next to impossible. I believe in the last 10 years, one person has only got it. And he's returning the favor. But should the law be a little more lenient in setting up news organizations, or should it be stricter in shutting them down if they lie? Where will this camel sit?
Well, the law and the rules are the same as it was earlier, when everyone who came got a license for a channel. The rules and the law has not been changed. But the present government has decided not to give it to anyone, or being very choosy about it.
Well,
The UPA government was not choosy about it. That's the difference between the Congress party and the BJP.
I disagree. I think a way to do that would be something that we had suggested. We had actually even drafted out a policy paper on this, that there should be a charter, like a citizen's charter, like the kind of extortion that used to happen in passport office. Haan, mil jayega, kab milega? There's no cutoff date. That in 30 days, either you get your passport or it is rejected on certain grounds. As long as there's no cutoff date, that either you get your license, whether it is an individual's passport or whether it is a license for a channel, you get in 60 days, or you are rejected along for these reasons. Until there is no cutoff date, people will say, "Haan, aapki file padi hai, 2 saal, 4 saal, 5 saal nikal jaye." And your party had an opportunity, and there were foolish activists like me who had presented policy papers that there should be this. You guys didn't do that. So now everyone is going to misuse that, right?
Well, do you know one thing? I've always been known as a Jhola chief minister. I've been supporting the Jholawalas like you, the activists.
I'm not a Jholawala. Okay.
I don't know whether you're Jholawala or not, but the fact remains that I have been known as a Jholawala chief minister who did support the activists to a great extent. Yeah, even Medha has been is a great friend of mine, and even when she was agitating against me, against my government, as a chief minister, I would go to her dharna stall and talk to her. I will take my chief secretary and we'll sort out our problems. So therefore, I think dialogue is a part of internal is a internal integral part of democracy, and there should never be a sort of lack of communication between the ruler and the ruled, between the establishment and outside.
I'd rather use the word between the governed and the governors,
And the governed,
not
correct?
rulers and the ruled.
I correct myself. I correct myself. Between the governed and the governed.
So, last question, Mr. Singh, where do you see the politics and indeed society in India going from here? Because the kind of hateful politics, the kind of rhetoric we see going forward, is it here to stay for a long time? Do you think there should be the emergence of another political force or a political party? Is the fulcrum of politics going to change from this whole Hindu-Muslim into any other issue? What should that issue be? You've been in politics for 50 years. You've seen it change, grow, evolve. You see the Congress party, through the Kesari years, Indira Gandhi years, then Sonia Gandhi years. Where are we headed?
Well, there was a lot of hope with Mr. Arvind Kejriwal when he formed the Aam Aadmi Party. And obviously, you were one of them, probably. But at the same time,
I didn't join the party, but I was a part of the Jan Lokpal movement.
Yes. So and in fact, I was the first one to sort of suggest to Mr. Arvind Kejriwal that this activism in a democracy doesn't work. If you are really serious about your issues, you should start a political party. And he did that, and he was quite successful about it. Although he threw out all those people who mattered in the Aam Aadmi Party. But at the same time, there's no, I won't grudge that because that is his party. How he runs it, it's not his business. But I see a great challenge before the country, the way this is being run, the way the opposition voice is being muffled, the way the media voice is being muffled, and the way Mr. Prime Minister and Mr. Amit Shah are conducting themselves. It is one thing to run a state like Gujarat, but this country with such vast ethnic diversity, you can't rule from the top. You can't, for example, in a corona period, before a lockdown, shouldn't he have taken the chief ministers into confidence? After all, we are a federal country. If he had just taken the chief ministers into confidence and given some time for the people to return to where they belong to, the kind of the misery which the migrant laborers went through could have easily been avoided. But then Mr. Modi and Mr. Amit Shah, they want to rule this country as they ruled Gujarat with the danda.
Yeah, hopefully at some stage I should be able to ask them if they agree to give me an interview. But about the politics, general politics, where is
hoping against hope?
Hope is what keeps us going, Mr. Singh. But generally, I mean, from your experience, give me a larger canvas. Which way is the politics headed? Is it going to be this polarized politics they're going to see? What are the historic transitions that made politics change? I mean, what made Indira a phenomena? You've seen that. What are those circumstances that make politics turn?
I will not go into details, but I will tell you one thing. The way capitalism has grown over these last few years, I see now it has peaked. And now, post-COVID, there is certainly going to be a change globally also and nationally also. This extreme right-wing has had its period, and people are quite fed up with this. And therefore, I think I see a re-emergence of socialism as such globally and nationally.
I see. All right. On that note, thank you for making the time. I'm glad I got 50 minutes. I wasn't sure whether I'd get more than 30, but I appreciate you having me at the time. And
Well, we are all. I have a lot of time on my hand these days because during the COVID, we have a lot of time on
And if you can, please put in a word for me. I'd like to interview Mr. Gandhi also.
no, do it on your own. He has a team of his own. He has a system of his own. You do that,
All right. Thank you very much. Have a good evening.
but only at on one request. You
Yes.
won't do an Arnab Goswamiism.
No, my interviews are always very calm. I don't shout or lose my temper.
Yes.
I give the person enough time to answer because also we are not inhibited by slots. There's no 50-minute slot or 20-minute slots. If an interview takes an hour, we give an hour. If it takes an hour, and we finally upload it without cutting.
How long have you been with the News on Laundry now?
Since 2012, sir, since it started.
Okay, good, interesting. All the
Right.
best.
Thank you. Have a good day. Bye.